I've just spent over 7 hours playing the new Kakarot DLC, also I could tell you whether it's worth your money or not. This is by far my most anticipated Kakarot DLC as they've created a whole new combat system. Also, they could retell the events of the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament. This is the first original Dragon Ball DLC on Kakarot and arguably on its best arc. Does it live up to the hype? How good is it compared to the other DLC? Let's talk about it. The 23rd World Tournament DLC starts with a pretty good surprise that hopefully you'll be able to discover on your own once you play the game and dodge all the spoilers because man, those thumbnails are everywhere. I'm gonna try to only show you side content and stuff that has been in the trailers and scans so you can go in as fresh as possible. But the grounded combat is one of the first things that this DLC introduces you to, and it feels very, very different. Suddenly, an enemy flying in the sky is much more menacing because you cannot do the same. You can still dodge around on the ground. There's a pretty good running speed, there's a dash button, and there's also a jump button, which is L2 by the way. Very hard to get used to. But you better do it because the jump seems very powerful. Incredibly useful at dodging out of the way of attacks, almost too useful actually. But grounded combat immediately changes how you think about the game, because now your abilities aren't just for damage or stun or guard break, now you're looking out for launchers, so you can follow up with air combos and juggle the opponent. And then you're looking for an ability to finish the combo with, or go for a reset because you're expecting the opponent to vanish out of there. For as long as this DLC is, this combat felt really fun to explore and discover. I mean, you're looking at Tien here, who is playable for the first time in Kakarot, but it's not just Tien because this Goku feels nothing like the version that you've played before. It's like a brand new character too. After you figure it out, it's pretty simple. I wouldn't say it's much more complex than the basic combat in Kakarot. In fact, when I streamed this, people asked me if I like this combat better than the flying combat, to which I said I don't know if this combat could carry the whole base game of Kakarot, but for how long this DLC is, man did it feel fresh. And that's how the grounded combat works, but during the World Martial Arts Tournament, you have a couple of extra rules. That's when you get the ring outs and the knockdowns. Now the ring outs sound pretty simple, but they feel a bit random. Basically, if you or your opponent are low enough health and they're close to the edge of the stage, this icon shows up on top of their head, and if you take damage, you can be launched out of the ring. During story mode, they actually don't let you win by ring out because of lore reasons, but during the post-game challenges, you can totally do it. Thing is, I tried doing it a lot, and I only ever got it once. So I don't know if the mechanic needs work, if it's just random. Either way, I feel like that's something the game should explain a little bit better. And then we also have the knockdown, which is when you run out of health, instead of dying, you can mash a button to get back up. And this can happen multiple times in the same fight, though not infinite times. At some point, you'll stop getting up. But I'm not a big fan of this, mainly because it makes fights easy, and this DLC's difficulty curve was already a little bit weird. The first two fights of this DLC, which I'm not going to show you because I think they're spoilers, are by far the hardest ones. And that's even if knockdowns were not a thing. So by adding that feature on top of it, and having most of the fights in this DLC be a part of the World Martial Arts Tournament, just kind of took the challenge out of it. Fortunately, there's plenty of challenge to be found in the post-game if you want to keep playing after the story is over. So you'll eventually be thankful for this mechanic. It's just in story mode, it felt like it made everything too easy. But the main takeaway is, grounded combat is cool. These tournament systems maybe need some tweaking, that's all. But a DLC is more than just combat, and CC2 really delivered this time with gorgeous cutscenes from start to finish. And voice acting everywhere, even in the smallest optional dialogue scenes. Everything during the main story was just voiced.
What's the matter? Did you finally remember who I am?
But just like the base game, there are perhaps some moments that you're looking forward to that maybe are a little underrepresented on this DLC. For instance, you don't play against Chi-Chi in the tournament. It's just a cutscene. A very good cutscene, but sadly not a playable fight. And if you were looking forward to watching Piccolo versus Krillin, that's just 3 screenshots with narration. Yeah. Now, despite those slight cuts, I did get the feeling that after finishing the main story, it went by pretty fast, and I didn't play a lot of it, because there are actually a lot of cutscenes, so it feels like you don't have a lot of fights to play through. And I did finish it after only 2.5 hours, when usually a DLC like this takes me about 4 hours to wrap up the main story. I mean, there's post-game in this DLC, of course. I started this video by telling you that I played for more than 7 hours, and I'm still not done. If you add story mode and post-game, this is about as big as any other DLC you've played so far. But the main story is much shorter, than Bardock or Trunks. Thing is, once you play it, you can totally understand why. If I had to rank the last 3 DLC, I would probably still place Trunks on top, but the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament would definitely go above Bardock. Because 1, they made a whole new combat system just for this DLC, and 2, it is so condensed. There is no filler whatsoever. Heck, there's not even a side quest during the main story. I mean, there's one at the very start, but that's it. Every single encounter, every gameplay moment is a uniquely crafted boss fight. And I gotta say, it's some of the best boss fights that they've ever designed. These are the stars of the show for sure. And it would be very easy for them to extend playtime. I mean, for as much as I like the Bardock DLC, that is, I love what they did with Planet Vegeta, the cutscenes, Bardock's abilities, everything, I do not want to go through another Horde battle. They make you play through 2 or 3 Horde battles, each one taking over 10 minutes to complete. It's not hard to extend playtime by doing something like that. But this DLC saves all of it for the post-game, because during the main story, it's almost like a boss rush game. But I know that these 2.5 hours, they are gonna bother some people, so whether or not this DLC is worth it to you, kinda depends on what you value. Especially if you go into a DLC hoping to just see the main story and never touch the post-game content, yeah, maybe you won't feel like you got your money's worth. But then again, it's a really good 2.5 hours if you enjoy Kakarot boss fights. Now, since story mode is kind of short, I think we gotta talk about post-game content because it just became that much more important. You get to explore 3 areas of the world map once you're finished, and these are smaller than in the base game, and they may look slightly different from what you remember. And yes, they finally found a reason for you to use the Nimbus. Since they took flying away, this is how you mainly move from place to place. But even they realized how slow the Nimbus was in the base game, so you can now boost with the Nimbus, essentially going at the same speed that you go in the base game when flying. I love this Nimbus, I love traveling on it, I wish it was in the base game, but more on that later. A fun byproduct of not being able to fly is that Goku is also not able to swim. Swimming and flying animations are the same in this game, so if you fall in water, Goku just resets, and I thought that was funny. Also funny but a bit confusing is, why does he use a fishing pole to fish? What happened to the tail? Does he get the fake tail later? What's the lore here? But there are basically 3 main things that you can do in the post game, and those are side quests, and I'm not gonna say there are a lot of them, I counted only 4. And you know, it's the usual Kakarot side quest where you usually do something pretty boring like go gather materials, yay. But once you're done, the writing can be pretty funny and you see Dragon Ball characters in a situation that you had not seen them in before, and I think that can be cool sometimes. You've also got tough training just like in the previous DLC. This is going to be the biggest time sink if you want to complete it because the last fight is at level 150 and well, you probably finished the story at around level 40, so that's a lot of levels in your post-game content. Luckily, everything gives you sacred water here. And then you have a new thing for this DLC, which are patrols. Now, patrols are a set of objectives that are given to you by the cops, and it's basically this DLC's version of villainous enemies. But instead of them floating around in the air waiting for you to approach them, since you can't fly here, it's groups of thugs standing on the ground. And it's kind of a grounded horde mode. I'm not gonna lie, these get pretty challenging. Sometimes it's a total bullet hell out there. It's really hard to dodge all of their attacks. Turns out flying made things a lot easier when it came to dodging attacks, let me tell you. So yeah, they pop up all around the world and you approach a group and a battle starts. You take care of them until they're all gone and then a stronger group shows up. You've got all of these patrol objectives. They give you some rewards like unlocking new talents even, and it's also pretty good for leveling up. This is a cool thing to do at the same time as tough training. But yeah, that's kind of it. It's all a bit grindy. It's all very optional too, and I'm usually okay with it, but in this DLC I'm having a tougher time gathering orbs because the usual method is just super dash through enemies, and now you can't do that because you're on a Nimbus. But the leveling up has been pretty smooth otherwise. And that's basically the new Kakarot DLC, though I do have to warn you, it's a bit glitchy. Not too much, it's not a big deal, but I did see 2 Taos at some point, and because all the fights are grounded and take place inside an arena, the camera stays much closer to the ground and sometimes clips through it, and your teleporting attacks may very well put you out of bounds. I'm not gonna say it was frequent, it maybe happened 4 or 5 times during my 7 hours, and I was always able to fix it by teleporting back into the arena myself. That was a bit of a bummer, but not a big problem. I was, however, However, pretty disappointed with two main things. Not enough to ruin the DLC for me, but I feel like we could just have these for little to no effort. The first one was the playable Tien. Now, I loved playing as Tien. I love his supers, I love his combos, it's great. But you only play him in story mode, and that's it. He's got 2 fights, and it's not just a tournament, there's some backstory, it's cool, but then that's it. There's no free roaming with Tien, there's not even a repeat of his boss fights on the tough training. You fight against him, but not as him. So it feels like a bit of a waste to make a fully playable character for only 2 fights essentially. You can't even pick him as a support, even though that's an option in the base game. And the other thing that really bothered me has precisely to do with the base game, because it's a real bummer to see nothing carry over from the DLC. You can't use Tien as a playable character in the base game, he's still only an assist. None of Goku's abilities carry over, and I had everyone in my chat asking me if the feat Kamehameha were in the base game now. It's just not, he doesn't have anything from the DLC. But the thing I'm mostly bummed about is the Nimbus. You cannot boost with a Nimbus in the base game. It's still completely useless. They fixed this thing in the DLC, but they kept it bad in the base game. And it's just those little things that, since you've done them already, why not improve the quality of the base game? The work is mostly done, don't let it go to waste. But I'm super happy with this DLC overall, and I hope I was able to tell you exactly why I loved it, but also why some of you may have some concerns. If you've played the DLC, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below, and if you didn't catch the last one, you can check out my review for the Bardock DLC right here. Thanks for watching. Boy.